The world of man reflects to a large extent through its own system how much God still controls everything around them, but still lets man go through his error to learn. Not to say that God enjoys watching man keep on burning himself in the fire continuously by putting his finger in. It's just he cannot understand how many times he has to keep doing it to wake up. But the majority of the population keeps on doing the same thing over and over again, which we know is the definition of insanity, when you expect different results, but you keep on doing it over and over again. Man seems to be down this journey for thousands of years, doing the same wrong thing over and over again, and then expecting his spiritual creator to come to his aid. Well, God expects you to change. So you can't be the same individual. You cannot be in with the mob of society and expect God to recognize you as one of his people. And you will not be light for taking truth into your heart. But the problem, what happens during the journey, most people get frustrated. They get confused. We know that. We understand confusion is merger, putting two things together that don't belong. It's not impossible, but once you do it, you've extinguished what was yours in the originality of it. The reclarification that I was asked to do on this is back to probably the invaluable versus valuable. Man's world works on this idea that a thing is worth X amount. So they create a thing that you use, and therefore we track a value on it. And then you have your individual value, whether it's debt or not, debt or asset. When you touch it, you have subscribed to it by your own voluntary consent. Therefore, they have not forced anybody to do this. Soon it will be. Soon those that are acting like a beast will be treated like a beast, and therefore will die like a beast. So our videos are trying to almost ground you to a level that you can't get past these words without having to do the due diligence. And then when you've done that, you realize what we've said here, if you can prove otherwise, is absolutely as much truth as we can find from what research only brings. And no one's been denied the right to go to the Bible or go get a dictionary of law or a dictionary of language and do their own research. None of this information came from not doing research. But when it becomes inconvenient for some, they will start to, of course, say, oh, this can't be right because that's not the way I feel at this moment. But they're looking for what they want under I versus what they would want for the betterment of their fellow man. And the betterment of their fellow man is not to increase the debt. Man was born dead in sin. That is it. He cannot earn or salvage anything. So man's world works the same way. You cannot earn your salvation. You can try, but you'll be just chasing a carrot. And in the aggregate, the debt will just continue to go on and on and on, because it's like you can never reach it to extinguish it, because it keeps on getting greater and greater. Because it's not rest, it's interest, and interest compounds. And those that are running the interest, if you're interested in using their name, provide you nothing to discharge that interest with, if you want to be surety for it. They just keep working and laboring. But all it'll do is every time you touch it, it just keeps on going up and up and up and up, because you have no way to take a negative and discharge a negative with a negative. So, let's just look at it in reality. The account's closed. If the nations, as we know in history, went bankrupt in around 33, they're under receivership. Just even in man's world, bankrupt is bankrupt. It's almost like civil death. They have no ability to pay their debts. So the account's closed, frozen. Can't open it without someone else's permission. The only one you can open an account that's been put into bankruptcy would be to go through the creditor. So a third party comes in who was the ones who lent the money to the worldly powers, who under eminent domain had the right to get themselves into debt, had the right to pledge under eminent domain whatever was theirs. So they pledged the titles of the people to a third party. But the people had the right to consent to contract with a third party. Once they did that, they're not in the same position they were before they did that. So they reopened the account. A closed account into an open account, where now it requires your pen to sign to say you'll take on the debt of whatever was the debt that was evened out against the population. So every time somebody comes into this, they either have the idea of staying with the closed account or the opportunity to contract with the creditor, get a new birthing name, start from scratch and say, I'll pay the debt. I will use the title of another and I will pay it. So they've done nothing wrong because you volunteered into something, so therefore it's not a monopoly. And under contract laws, there have been laws passed from the 1700s that prevented anybody from preventing people from contracting with one another. But just because you've contracted with someone doesn't mean that you are in good relationship with the state, because you could end up being an enemy of the state by who you're contracting with. You could actually even be considered to be an enemy alien because of who you're contracting with. And therefore, you really have no right to property. And therefore, you're just basically in the way. Kind of almost like a thorn in the side. And therefore, what people have mixed up to reality is the citizen of Caesar already has its own signature on it. And it was never intended for personal identification because there was two jurisdictions that would have occurred at your birth. One that was God's and one that belonged to Caesar. And because they didn't know which way you were going to go, they couldn't seal your fate. Only you could seal your fate by what you're doing. And we all fell prey to something that we didn't see. And don't worry. Yes, there is a master deceiver out there called Satan, and he has deceived the world. As he deceived Eve. There's nothing new under the sun. And you have to take responsibility for the position you're in now. And if you choose to go in a direction that is out, you can't keep with what you have that was in, because that is the property of another that has an obligation to it. To ask how you're going to walk from there, you would have to do that first. And generally when I say that, that usually closes the door of conversation with most people, because they now say, oh, he's rendering me into a position that is impossible. I can't give back my property I've signed a mortgage to. I can't do that. Well, they walked into it, so certainly they can walk out of it. It's whether they choose to. There are people who are not $300,000 in a mortgage in debt that are out there. Okay? So to say that that you have to be in that is not logical. It's not truthful. And so if you do not understand these concepts, you better reboot your computer again up here, because God gave you a good computer. We're just not using it properly. And if you're inputting bad information into your head, which has been perpetrated across the internet, which has really narrowed most of our hits on the videos, because it's not popular anymore to listen to this video or these videos, because it's not giving this a money solution. We never promised a money solution, and neither did Christ. He promised you peace. He did not promise you money. He promised you favor and grace. He did not promise you entitlement to Caesar's property. We hope we've clarified these points. And we have about 2 more videos left to do in this series. Stay tuned.